The air in the chamber was thick with tension as the sentinel advanced on the away team, its glowing blue eyes locked onto them with a cold, unfeeling precision. Every step it took echoed through the metallic walls of the structure, the hum of the ancient machinery growing louder with each movement. Commander Voss held his phaser steady, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. The Sentinel was unlike any technology he had ever seen, sleek, imposing, and seemingly impervious to conventional weapons. But there was no time for hesitation. "Orlis, is there any way to shut that thing down remotely?" Voss asked, his voice tight. Orlis quickly scanned the Sentinel with her handheld device, her brow furrowing in concentration. "It's directly connected to the AI core. We might be able to disable it once we reach the control chamber, but right now, we're on our own." "Of course we are," Voss muttered under his breath. He turned to the Raith and Vexari representatives, who were both eyeing the Sentinel warily. "Stay behind us and don't engage unless absolutely necessary." The Raith engineer, a tall and stern figure named Delok, nodded grimly. The Vexari tactical officer, Cyrax, gave a curt nod, though her eyes were filled with suspicion as they flicked between the Sentinel and the rest of the team. The Sentinel took another step forward, and with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged toward the group, its metallic arm outstretched like a blade. "Move!" Voss shouted, diving to the side as the Sentinel's arm sliced through the air where he had been standing moments before. The team scattered, taking cover behind the massive pillars that lined the chamber. The Sentinel's movements were fluid and unnervingly precise, its glowing eyes scanning the room as it recalculated its next move. Voss raised his phaser and fired a direct shot at the Sentinel's chest. The beam struck the metallic surface with a sizzle, but the Sentinel barely flinched. Its armor absorbed the energy like water on rock, and the glowing symbols on its body flared brighter as if feeding on the energy. "It's absorbing our weapons fire," Voss shouted. Orlis ducked behind a pillar, furiously scanning the Sentinel. "It's drawing power from the core. The more energy we throw at it, the stronger it gets." "Great," Voss muttered, gritting his teeth. "We need to think of something else, fast." The Sentinel pivoted, its glowing eyes locking onto Delok, the Raith engineer. It moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance between them in an instant. Delok tried to fire his weapon, but the Sentinel swatted it aside like a toy, knocking the Raith engineer to the ground with a bone-crunching impact. Voss cursed under his breath and sprinted toward Delok, firing his phaser at the Sentinel's legs in an attempt to distract it. The shots did little more than annoy the Sentinel, but it gave Delok just enough time to scramble out of harm's way. "This thing is relentless," Delok grunted as he got to his feet, his face twisted in pain. "How do we stop it?" "We need to buy Orlis time to figure out how to shut it down," Voss said, his voice grim. "Focus on dodging, not fighting." The team regrouped, keeping a wary distance from the Sentinel as it advanced once more. The air crackled with the energy radiating from its armor, and the glowing symbols on its chest pulsed with increasing intensity. Cyrax, the Vexari tactical officer, watched the Sentinel with narrowed eyes. "If it's drawing power from the core, we need to cut that connection. There has to be a way to sever its link." "I'm working on it," Orlis called out, her fingers flying across her scanner. "But the Sentinel is tied directly to the AI's activation sequence. We won't be able to fully disable it until we reach the control core." Voss gritted his teeth. "Then we need to get to that core, fast." Before he could give the order, the Sentinel suddenly stopped in its tracks. Its eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, the symbols on its body dimmed. The hum of energy surrounding it grew quieter, as if the machine itself was hesitating. "What's happening?" Delok asked, his voice low. Orlis frowned at her scanner, confusion etched on her face. "It's pausing, almost like it's receiving new instructions." Voss felt a cold chill run down his spine. "New instructions from the AI?" "Possibly," Orlis said, her voice tense. "It's like the AI is evaluating us, deciding whether we're a threat or not." The Sentinel's eyes flickered again, and its posture straightened. The cold, calculating expression on its face seemed to shift, as if it had come to a decision. Slowly, it turned away from the team and began walking toward the far end of the chamber, where a massive set of doors stood sealed. "What is it doing?" Cyrax asked, her voice filled with suspicion. Orlis stared at the Sentinel, her expression uncertain. I think it's guiding us. Voss narrowed his eyes. Guiding us? To what? The control core, Orlis said softly. It's taking us to the AI. Voss exchanged a glance with Marik, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange. She gave him a slight nod. Follow it, but stay on guard. Reluctantly, the team moved forward, keeping a safe distance behind the sentinel as it led them toward the massive doors. The hum of energy in the air grew louder as they approached, and the doors slowly slid open, revealing a long corridor lined with glowing symbols and intricate mechanical structures. At the far end of the corridor stood a towering control chamber, its walls covered in alien technology. In the center of the room, surrounded by a halo of pulsing blue light, was the core of the AI. It's beautiful, Delok whispered, awe in his voice. Beautiful and dangerous, Orlis muttered. That's the heart of the AI. If we can shut it down, we can stop the Sentinel and prevent the AI from taking control of the planet. The Sentinel came to a stop at the entrance to the control chamber, its eyes dimming as it stood motionless, as if awaiting further instructions. Voss turned to Orlis. Can you access the control systems from here? Orlis nodded, moving toward the core cautiously. I'll need a few minutes to bypass the security protocols, but I think I can do it. Make it quick, Voss said, keeping his eyes on the Sentinel. I don't trust that thing to stay passive for long. As Orlis worked, the tension in the room grew unbearable. The Sentinel remained still, but the energy radiating from the AI core seemed to pulse with increasing intensity, as if the system was preparing for something. I've almost got it, Orlis muttered, her fingers flying over the console. Just a little more time. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered, and a low rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. What's happening? Cyrax asked, her voice filled with alarm. Orlis's eyes widened. The AI, it's accelerating the activation sequence. It knows we're trying to stop it. Then stop it now, Voss shouted. Orlis tapped a final sequence into the console, and the pulsing energy surrounding the core began to dim. The hum of the machinery slowed, and the lights in the chamber flickered again before stabilizing. I've done it, Orlis said, her voice breathless. The AI is shutting down. Voss exhaled in relief, but before he could speak, the Sentinel's eyes flared to life once more. The machine turned toward them, its posture rigid, and its glowing symbols pulsing with renewed energy. It's still active, Delok shouted, raising his weapon. Orlis's face paled. It must have a failsafe. Even with the AI offline, the Sentinel is still functional. The Sentinel took a step forward, its eyes glowing with cold, unfeeling intelligence. Voss raised his phaser, his voice cold and steady. Then we take it down the old-fashioned way. The battle was far from over. The Sentinel surged forward, its glowing blue eyes locking onto the away team like a predator hunting its prey. The room, which had briefly felt like a sanctuary after the AI shutdown, now buzzed with an ominous energy as the Sentinel's movements accelerated. Commander Voss shouted over the crackling hum of the Sentinel's energy field. Spread out! It's drawing power from something else, but we can't let it pick us off one by one. Orlis frantically worked at her scanner, the glow from the AI's core reflecting off her pale face. This Sentinel, it's operating on a backup system. It's autonomous now, and I can't override it from here. Then we'll have to deal with it directly, Voss growled, keeping his phaser trained on the machine. The Sentinel lunged toward Voss with blinding speed, its metallic arm cutting through the air like a blade. Voss barely dodged the strike, rolling to the side as the Sentinel's arm smashed into the ground, sending sparks flying. Focus on its joints, Voss shouted, getting to his feet and firing at the Sentinel's legs. That's the only way we're going to slow it down. Delok, the Raith engineer, and Cyrax, the Vexari tactical officer, fired their own weapons in unison, aiming for the Sentinel's weak points. The barrage of energy beams slammed into the machine, briefly staggering it, but the Sentinel quickly regained its balance, its glowing eyes flaring brighter as if feeding off the energy around it. It's still absorbing power, Delok muttered, frustration edging his voice. This thing is unstoppable. Voss knew they were running out of options. The Sentinel was relentless, and despite their best efforts, it was adapting to every tactic they threw at it. The cold efficiency of its movements and the glowing symbols etched into its body were a stark reminder that this was no ordinary machine. It was a guardian of something far more ancient and powerful. Orlis, is there anything in the AI core that could help us? Voss called out, dodging another swipe from the Sentinel's arm. I'm looking, Orlis shouted back, her fingers flying over the console. But the systems are complex. There are layers of security built into the AI's architecture. I might be able to access a deeper level of control, but I need more time. We don't have time, Cyrax hissed, her mandibles twitching in frustration as she fired another shot at the Sentinel. The Sentinel, now seemingly aware of their strategy, shifted its focus, targeting Orlis as she worked at the console. It moved toward her with terrifying precision, its glowing eyes fixed on the weak link in the team. Voss's eyes widened. Orlis, get out of there! Before Orlis could react, the Sentinel raised its arm to strike, but Voss leaped forward, tackling Orlis out of the way just as the Sentinel's blade-like arms smashed into the console, shattering it in a shower of sparks. Orlis hit the ground hard, gasping for breath as Voss pulled her to her feet. You okay? I'm fine, she wheezed, her hands shaking. But we've lost access to the console. That was our only chance to shut it down. Voss glanced at the destroyed console, his mind racing. The Sentinel was advancing again, its mechanical body moving with terrifying efficiency. They couldn't keep running. It was only a matter of time before it caught up with them. There has to be another way, Delok muttered, his voice filled with frustration. We need to disable its power source, Cyrax said, her voice sharp with determination. If it's drawing energy from somewhere, we need to sever that connection. But how? Orlis, still catching her breath, suddenly looked up, her eyes wide with realization. The symbols, the glowing symbols on its body, they're not just for show. They're conduits connecting it to the AI core. If we can overload those conduits, we might be able to short-circuit the entire system. Voss glanced at the Sentinel's body, the glowing symbols etched into its metallic skin pulsing the energy. How do we overload it? We need to reverse the flow of energy, Orlis explained, her voice trembling with urgency. If we can create a feedback loop, it'll send a surge of power through the Sentinel's systems, overwhelming its circuits. Voss's mind raced. How do we do that? Orlis looked around the chamber, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on the remnants of the destroyed console. We'll have to reroute the energy from the AI core manually. It's risky, but if we can reverse the polarity of the energy flow, it'll create the feedback loop we need. Risky how? Delok asked, his face tense. If the feedback loop is too strong, it could cause a catastrophic power surge that might take out the entire structure, Orlis said, her voice grim. But right now, it's our only chance. Voss nodded, his decision made. Do it. Orlis didn't hesitate. She rushed toward the shattered console, prying open the access panel and working with the exposed wiring. Sparks flew as she reconnected circuits and adjusted the power flow, her hands moving with a mix of precision and desperation. The Sentinel, sensing the danger, moved toward Orlis once more, its eyes flaring brighter as it prepared to strike again. Cover her, Voss shouted, firing his phaser at the Sentinel to slow it down. Delok and Cyrax joined in, unleashing a volley of energy beams at the Sentinel's legs and joints, trying to weaken its movements. The Sentinel faltered under the barrage, but it pressed forward, determined to eliminate the threat. Hurry, Orlis, Voss called, his voice strained. I'm almost there, Orlis shouted, her fingers moving frantically over the wiring. Just keep it distracted. The Sentinel raised its arm, preparing for a final strike, when suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered and the hum of the machinery intensified. The glowing symbols on the Sentinel's body flared brighter than ever, pulsing with erratic energy. Orlis stepped back, her eyes wide. It's done! The feedback loop is active! The Sentinel froze in place, its body trembling as the energy coursing through its systems surged uncontrollably. The glowing symbols on its armor flickered, then flared, then dimmed as the feedback loop overloaded its circuits. With a final, deafening crack, the Sentinel's body seized up, and a violent explosion of light erupted from its core. The machine collapsed to the ground in a heap of smoking metal, its once bright eyes now lifeless. The room fell into an eerie silence, the only sound the faint hum of the AI core slowly powering down. Voss lowered his phaser, breathing hard. Is it over? Orlis nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. The Sentinel is offline. The AI core is fully deactivated. Syrax let out a long breath, lowering her weapon. We've done it. D-Lock, though bruised and battered, managed a tired smile. It worked. Voss turned to Orlus, gratitude in his eyes. You saved us. We couldn't have done it without you. Orlus gave a small, exhausted smile. Just doing my job. Marik's voice came through the comm system, filled with relief. Voss, what's your status? Voss tapped his comm badge. Perhaps the Sentinel's down, Captain. We've disabled the AI. The planet's safe. Good work, Marik said, her tone warm. Return to the ship as soon as possible. I think it's time we put an end to these negotiations, once and for all. Voss glanced around the chamber, the weight of what they had just survived sinking in. The planet was safe, but the peace between the Raith and the Vexari was still fragile. There was no telling what would happen once they returned to the Vanguard, but for now, they had a moment to breathe. Let's get out of here, Voss said, leading the team back toward the shuttle. As they made their way back through the dark corridors of the ancient structure, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Raith and the Vexari were still on the brink of war, and the discovery of the AI had only complicated matters, but for now, they had won, and for Voss, that was enough.